holy alliances. Sorry, I think I need to speak in English. First, I will talk a little bit about the interpretations. Tenemos la posibilidad de contar con, de aprovechar la interpretación de inglés a castellano y de inglés a francés para quienes quieran utilizarla, tanto de manera online como de manera presencial, con un código QR que va a aparecer ahora. ¿Querés comentarlo en francés para los que estén?
Bonjour à tous. Donc on a l'interprétation de l'anglais vers le français et si vous voulez l'utiliser, il faut juste que vous scanniez le code QR qui va apparaître à l'écran.
Thank you. That being said, now I would like to open this panel. We have, as you can see, 2 panelists in person, and we also have some panelists online. And at this moment, we will be talking about fostering multi-stakeholder coalitions for food system transformations. In this panel, what we want to achieve and to talk about is about what is needed to be able to create and to build a transformative resilient food system, and what's the big value of collaboration among stakeholders and actors that may not be the usual kind of relationships that we build among food systems. Of course, you have the farmers, and you also have the private sector and the public sector, and that's the kind of conversation that we want to have today. So I will be presenting our speakers, maybe one by one, so that everyone remembers very well the names and the words. Can we see the online speakers, please? I will, thanks for being online. I know it's early in Latin America and on Sunday for both, so thanks for being there. Hernan, I will present you. We have Hernan Lázaro Cabello. He's a specialist in Peru's Social Development Cooperation Fund, FONCODES. He's representing the public sector. The question I would like to share with you is, in order to achieve transformative and resilient food system change, sorry, I got a little confused there. There is a need for a holistic approach to the matter, and so I would like to hear a little bit more about the work that you're doing in FONCODES to integrate the different points of views and the different actors in the work you do. Yes. No, the other one, please. Víctor. Oh.
Buenos días. Buenos días. La pregunta lo abordaré desde la perspectiva de la experiencia del FONCODES en el trabajo de desarrollo productivo, desarrollo de capacidades productivas y de gestión de emprendimientos que realiza FONCODES con los proyectos Jacuñay y Nueva Jayatay a nivel nacional. Ahora bien, el cambio climático afecta a todo el sistema y como tal sus efectos son a nivel territorial. Y específicamente para la agricultura familiar, estos efectos se traducen en sequías, inundaciones, friaje, granizadas, etcétera, destrozando su pequeña agricultura. Y de otro lado, los organismos del sector público trabajan de una manera aislada, cada uno con su presupuesto, cada uno por su lado, sin la menor intención de fortalecer un trabajo sinérgico. Mientras tanto, la población de la agricultura familiar se siente solo, sin conexiones, sin intervenciones de parte del Estado de una manera cohesionada. Frente a esto, el cambio climático debe venir de los territorios. Entonces, el mayor desafío que se plantea frente a este contexto es fortalecer la articulación interinstitucional de todos los sectores, es decir, a nivel territorial. El cambio para la adaptación al cambio climático debe venir de los territorios, Debe venir el conocimiento de las prácticas ancestrales de los gobiernos de los poblados locales. Entonces, necesitamos que esta interrelación venga de lo más profundo. Por eso, Foncodes Next, por eso Foncodes, para la ejecución de sus proyectos, utiliza el núcleo ejecutor como un modelo operacional. El núcleo ejecutor es una cohesión no convencional que permite trasladar recursos de tesoro público al privado. Esa es la magia, digamos, que realiza Foncodes. Recursos del tesoro público al sector privado, a la población población organizada que se constituye para recibir financiamiento público del Foncodes para realizar un proyecto en su ámbito en beneficio de la comunidad. Y ellos son responsables de la administración de los recursos, toma de decisiones y vigilancia social, con la participación de toda la comunidad y cumple con responsabilidades según la normatividad, el conjunto de formatos, normatividad existente de los proyectos. Bajo este modelo operacional del núcleo actor, Foncodes desarrolla el proyecto Jacuñay de Hayatay, que es un conjunto de proyectos productivos para hogares rurales con economía de subsistencia en zonas de pobreza, pobreza extrema y vulnerabilidad al cambio climático en Sierra y Selva del Perú. Y tiene como objetivo fundamental contribuir a la generación de oportunidades de acceso a mercados locales con el fin de incrementar, por un lado, ingresos económicos y de otro lado, mejorar la alimentación. Se utiliza 4 estrategias fundamentalmente. Por un lado, desarrolla capacidades productivas en estos hogares para el fortalecimiento del sistema de producción familiar, desde la identificación de la fuente de agua, recurso hídrico, para la implementación de un sistema de riego tecnificado, pasando por la producción de abono orgánico, pastos mejorados, crianza de animales menores, también la producción de cultivos y tubérculos andinos de la zona, también agroforestería, y también la mejora de la vivienda productiva a través de la implementación de cocina mejorada, kit de agua segura, manejo de residuos sólidos. Con esto, el proyecto busca fortalecer las capacidades a fin de mejorar la producción y mejorar la productividad y generar excedentes para llevar a mercado local. De otro lado, también el proyecto realiza una promoción de emprendimientos rurales inclusivo a través de fondos concursables. Un conjunto de emprendimientos rurales inclusivos en las diferentes líneas de negocios, haciendo que las ventajas comparativas de estos pueblos lejanos se conviertan en ventajas competitivas a través de la capacitación, la asistencia técnica y una dotación de un capital semilla a estos emprendimientos. Esto se hace con una articulación también interinstitucional para generar sinergias en la zona. Es decir, es el desarrollo territorial que busca el proyecto. Y el periodo de ejecución es de 3 años. En estos 3 años, el proyecto, por un lado, en el primer año implementa las tecnologías y las acciones que he señalado. En el segundo año se busca la réplica, la adaptabilidad de estas prácticas. Y el tercer año se busca ya la consolidación. Sin embargo, para el fortalecimiento del accionar de la agricultura familiar de subsistencia, no solamente es esta coalición no convencional que trabaje solo. Es decir, el núcleo actor no lo puede hacer solo. Una de las mayores oportunidades y también desafío fundamental es que este núcleo actor se fortalezca a través de la intervención de otras entidades del Estado, empresas privadas, organismos no gubernamentales, como el caso específico del proyecto regional Andes Resilientes, que con el financiamiento de la cooperación suiza COSUDE y la facilitación del BETAS y la Fundación Avina, están generando las condiciones adecuadas para la sostenibilidad, para el mantenimiento y encontrar la consolidación de emprendimientos rurales inclusivos en Cusco y Puno. Y Foncodes, a través de estos insumos, lo replicará a nivel de otros departamentos del país. Entonces, en suma, lo que se necesita es fortalecer la articulación interinstitucional con la finalidad de crear una plataforma común de atención a los agricultores en la que se lleve a la creación del valor público, pero en un contexto de cambio climático. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Next.
Okay, thanks a lot. It's really interesting to hear about this bottom-up approach in which you really promote the incorporation and mainstreaming the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities in the development of public policies. Next, I would like to give the floor to share it with Marie. Marie Verrier, is that correct? Okay, thanks. She's the development director from Global She Alliance. And Marie, today I would like to ask you, from your experience and the best practices from the Global She Alliance, can you share an experience of a multi-stakeholder coalition that was implemented in order to promote a more multi-stakeholder approach to the transformation of food systems?
Okay, thank you. So before I answer, I'll just give a couple of context. So I work for the Global She Alliance, which is the industry association for shea. Shea is a tree. It's a semi-domesticated species, so it grows naturally in the Sahelian Sudanian zone of Africa, among farmland, fallows, community land, and forest. And the industry is facing two major challenges. The first one is that in terms of restoration, the tree population have been declining. So with population pressure, the tree is not regenerating as it should. It's a very good charcoal tree, so it's being cut down a lot. And we see more and more trees disappearing. The second challenge that the industry is facing is around women empowerment. It's one crop in which it's only women who collect and process, and they earn very little for all the work they do. But at the same time, it's an industry that has a very big spread. So you have about 16 million women who collect shea in Africa, and you have shea in 21 countries. You have about 2 billion trees that are completely spread out. So because of the scale of this issue, the industry decided to kind of come together to address it. And that's more or less how the Global She Alliance was created 12 years ago. So in terms of fostering a multi-stakeholder approach, I think what is the most important is really to embed it in the structure of the coalition or the association. So if you take the Global She Alliance as an example, we have an executive committee which is in charge of doing all of the strategic decision and strategic orientation of the alliance. And in the executive committee, we made sure that all of the different stakeholder category of the GSA are represented. So we have the cooperative who collect and process shea. We have all of the different private sectors, from the traders to the industrials to the brands, as well as the NGOs. And all of them are more or less represented at an equal level, along with the productive country, so that there is no one stakeholder that has more power or can influence more the decisions than others. And then this kind of multi-stakeholder representation has been declined in all of the different activities that we do. So to govern our sustainability strategy, we have working groups, and similarly, we make sure that there is not one stakeholder group that dominates the other, and then everyone has equal representation. We pay attention to inclusivity, so the meetings are usually held in West Africa, so that it's easier for the cooperative to travel. We do translation so that everyone can participate as they want. So that's really in terms of making sure that everyone has equal power in the different, structure of the coalition. And then I think the second lessons learned is really to is really to take it further in the program implementation. So whenever we do a program on women empowerment or we do a restoration program, we also make sure that all of the members have equal capacity to participate in the program. So we provide technical assistance to, for example, to the cooperative or the community NGO so that they can participate to the program. We also do bilingual application so that the Francophone are not disadvantaged for the Anglophones, and so on. And I think it's still a long road, and we still have a lot to improve in terms of sustainability in Shea. But what we have seen, and I think the main change that we have seen since 12 years ago that we were created, it's really that private sector now sees the value of working together to address challenges. So they have seen the difference between what they can achieve as an individual and then the scale of change that they can achieve if they work together. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. That was really interesting to see how you really put an effort on the governance process to really make sure that all the voices are included, from the farmer to the private sector, and how to make sure that they can interact and that their voice is heard in the decision-making process. So thanks a lot for sharing that experience. Now I would like to hear Jorge Andrade. Jorge Andrade is the program director from Potato Agri-Food System at the International Potato Center. Jorge, could you please tell us how do you see the role of the research and academia sectors in forging alliances with other critical stakeholders in the transformation of food system?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Let me provide some background about first the International Potato Center and then about something about potatoes. So the International Potato Center is a research organization. We are based in Peru. We have regional offices in Kenya, India, and in China. And we work in over 20 countries around the world to improve the production of potato and sweet potato and other Andean roots and tubers in order to improve the livelihoods of small-scale farmers. So our experience, the experience that I'm going to describe now is especially from the Andes, from Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. We started this work several years ago in the early 2000s, and we realized that, well, you know, in the Andes, potatoes were domesticated almost 8,000 years ago. So these native potatoes, we have thousands of varieties of native potatoes. They were not valued by the public. So the work what we did was to put in value these native potatoes. We created a methodology. It's called the multi-stakeholder platform, where we developed technological innovations. For example, new ways of producing seed for growing the potatoes, or commercial innovations. For example, new commercial products made of chips, for example, and organizational innovations. And for example, new ways where farmers can organize themselves to produce these potatoes. So we have excellent results in these three countries. In Peru, for example, in alliance with the gastronomic sector, there is a whole boom of native potatoes now. So you can go to the best restaurants in Lima and you can find native potatoes. We have the National Potato Day in Peru and in Ecuador. And by the way, yesterday, the General Assembly of the United Nations declared May 30th as the International Day of the Potato. So this is a big day for us, the people who work on potatoes. Potato is the number 4 food in the world, so it's quite important for us. So regarding your question, I think the main role of the academia in these multi-stakeholder approaches, I think, is to document the process. I think that is quite important, to write about what we are doing, publish papers, to write blogs, for example, to document the experience. Also, it's important to to create methodologies around these experiences. Because when we create a methodology, for example, in the case of this experience that I mentioned, this multi-stakeholder framework approach, there is a whole methodology that was created. So we can apply the same methodology in other contexts, for example, in Africa or in Asia. And I think also is important for the academia is to have to be like a neutral player, because with the scientific rigor that we apply to the activities that we work, we have the capacity to convince other partners and work in these multi-stakeholder platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was taking a lot of notes because I think there's a lot of value on science and researchers being present and active and working together with local communities and farmers in order to really raise that knowledge and systematize that knowledge. And we know that native potatoes and native food is always the one that is historically more prepared to face the impacts of climate change. They are prepared to really adapt to the change in climate that we're facing. So I think it's a really valuable experience that you shared. Thanks for that. Finally, I would like to hear a little bit of Emmanuel Periot experience. Emmanuel is the managing director for vegetable oils. Hello, thanks for being here today. And my question for you is, how do you see the role of the private sector in forging alliances with other critical stakeholders and private competitors in the transformation of food systems?
Thank you, and thank you for having me today. So I'm going to try to provide a few insights from the private sector. Olvea is a producer and refiner of vegetable oils as well as omega-3 solutions worldwide. And we are good at integrating value chains. So this is where we have to foster multi-stakeholders alliances in order to be successful. The first thing I believe is speed is really of essence, and the private sector is usually nimble enough to be some kind of catalyst among other stakeholders. And this is the role that we're trying to play, especially in West Africa. There is one concept that I think also needs to be promoted locally when we develop these integrated supply chains. This is what I call co-opetition. If you know what that means, it's basically being able as private companies to deal with other private companies and to forge alliances in places that usually are very remote. Some of the food crops we deal with are endemic, and there are places where there's no other way but to collaborate with other private companies. And this is what we do on a regular basis, and this is how we are able to successfully develop these supply chains. And I'll give you a few examples. I think, then we need to understand, where does it happen, forging these alliances. And I think this is where innovation hubs, collaborative platforms, and alliances such as the Global Shea Alliance, because we as a company deal with shea in a big way. And as Mary highlighted it, the Global Shea Alliance has this ability to create these multi-stakeholder alliances. Then within these supply chain, as I said, integration is key. Why is it key? Because for any given food crop, we need to enhance efficiency. I mean, unfortunately, these crops need to be, or fortunately, to be sold, and efficiency is of essence. The value creation needs to be at the right place, which means that when we integrate value chain as a private sector and as a private company, we make sure that value is fixed at the farmer level, and that there is a right spread of the value throughout the value chain. Systematically, we look at reducing waste as well, which is, when we, as a company, we produce oil as an example, there are lots of co-products that need to be looked into, and we are systematically looking at reducing waste and optimizing the co-products. And of course, this means that across the food systems that we develop, we systematically promote sustainability. I think one other aspect of things here is funding. You know, we look at projects, but of course they need to be funded. So as a company, we provide funding. So this is one of the benefits working with the private sector. But of course, funding can come from other places, and especially for ag-driven projects. In a paradoxical way, you sometimes need only a few €100,000 or dollars in order to generate something big. And again, in a paradoxical way, sometimes being granted funding for these small projects is more difficult. And there's a saying in Ghana, which goes like this. It's called "Give me a hand and I'll climb." So sometimes you need only a few hundred thousands to make a big difference locally. And we've done that as an example in Ghana recently, where we have developed a supply chain around FFL, so Fair for Life shea nuts. And we did gather many stakeholders around the table. We had the Global Shea Alliance. We had various cooperatives that were funded in order to be able to gather these Fair for Life nuts. And what makes sense at the end is that this Fair for Life certification, which was granted to these cooperatives through this multi-stakeholder collaboration, helped us, develop, and we will in the future, things like schools, medical centers, boreholes, storage facilities, and all of that is being governed by co-ops themselves. We're not involved. We just develop the supply chain and let them manage their own funding, which is exactly what needs to happen. And of course, this allows us to waive, middlemen and brokers. So they're definitely bypassed, and this should definitely be the case locally in the projects that we develop in West Africa. One thing that I would like to mention as well is, as a private sector, we facilitate also market access to local communities and for small and local producers. We try to improve distribution channels, so create these distribution channels for these crops that otherwise would not be able to sometimes sell and export what they produce. And this ends up in a more inclusive and resilient food system. So sometimes, this creation of an export market is needed. And this is what we do. We do it, as an example, in Kenya around avocados, where we gather what we call oil stock. So these are off-grade avocados that are then transformed into oil. And this is basically working on what you call upcycling. And this is a heavy contribution to the circular economy. So we, as a private company, provide an additional income to small-scale farmers. Of course, this means that we, as a group, spread sustainable practices everywhere we operate, and grant some kind of B2C access for some of the food crops to local communities. So this is kind of a long-term benefit. One last thing that I would like to mention, which is very important, that we deploy our digital tools. So sometimes locally, the communities we work with in West Africa and East Africa do not have things like mobile phones. So we equip them with mobile phones so they can trace exactly what they do. So of course, for us as a company, this provides us with an additional argument in order to sell our products, but also it provides a streak of data for co-ops in order to improve the way they seed and they harvest their crops year over year. So it's really a two-way street. And this works usually through several stakeholders, co-ops, NGOs, private sector, us, but also funding coming from national development agencies. We historically work with Denmark, Netherlands, and France. So this works well as long as this is well funded. So as a conclusion, very briefly, we are, as a private sector, able to transform food systems, but this involves proactive collaboration, some kind of innovation, and a commitment to sustainability. And by forming these alliances, including our competitors, as I said, through co-opetition, we think we can contribute to create a more resilient, inclusive, and socially and environmentally sustainable food systems. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was really interesting to hear you talk about alliances with competitors, among competitors. I think that's really a step forward. So I like that very much. And I think that the example that you made on how the private sector could help to raise the scale of the market and the opportunities for the farmers. For example, you were mentioning this export market that you helped develop. I think that's a really great example of how these, as we call unholy alliances, really make a difference for the whole value chain. I didn't mention it before, but we have an artist online who's listening to everything you're saying and preparing music, putting your words into music, so we will be able to hear that afterwards because that music will be shared. So I think that's really an innovative way of sharing knowledge too. And now I would like to go through a second round of questions. I think we have a little time for that, but I would like to make maybe an uncomfortable question, because you've been talking about the work you're doing and how this collaboration helps build the process and increase the opportunities. But I would also like to hear a little bit about the challenges and gaps to really achieve collaboration, because sometimes it's not that easy, and maybe you can share some lessons learned with the audience. So maybe we can start with Mahui.
Okay, so I think for us, what is mainly missing in terms of collaboration and alliance is everything that goes beyond Shea. So Shea is important, but it's a small component of income for women. So it's only like 30% of their income. So they do a lot of things. They do farming and other activities. At the same time, what is driving decline in tree population of Shea also comes from outside. So it's mostly linked to commercial agriculture. So whenever they clear the land, they cut all of the trees. And charcoal production. Shea is a very good tree for charcoal. So I think for us, what we are really trying, and it has also been challenging, is to go beyond Shea. And how can we do alliance with other crops so that, this cooperative that we have formed of women Shea collectors, they can do maize, or they can do apiculture, or moringa, or other crops. And the same thing on the restoration angle. How can we engage this charcoal producer? How can we engage the farmers? How can we engage men also, so that they don't cut the tree? So for us, I think going broader than just one crop and having either a livelihood center approach or a landscape approach, and making this alliance over the whole Shea landscape is really what we have been trying to work on. On some places we've been having success. I think for apiculture, we have worked with the private sector who is able to provide a market, but I think we need to do a lot more on that.
Pretty sure that each process has its own challenges, and each kind of crop has its own identity, I may guess. And Jorge, could you share us a little bit about challenges and gaps?
Ones is that these multi-stakeholder alliances need time to evolve and mature. So related to that, we see two issues. The first one is identifying long-term funding for funding these alliances, and then dealing with political instability. So for the first topic about the identifying long-term funding opportunities, I think it's very important to have a very comprehensive and aggressive resource mobilization strategy to identify donors, to engage with donors, and to get funding. I think that is critically important. For example, it's very important to have these KPIs, these key performance indicators, really clearly defined, because this is the way what we can show progress in these alliances. And then for dealing with political instability, in the countries that we work in, is not unusual to have, for example, 3-4 ministries of agriculture in the same year. So that political instability really affects these alliances, the multi-stakeholder alliances. So the way to address this issue is, for example, is to work with middle management instead of working directly with the ministry. So that is a way to kind of work around these issues. Then I think it's also important to engage with a different range of stakeholders, not just the usual suspects. So for example, in the case of Peru, we are now working with the mining sector, for example, with mining companies that are providing funding for research and development projects. And then I think it's also important to find topics that are really excited, that create passion, that people are really passionate about that. So for example, that could be an asset. For example, these native potatoes, that is an asset that we have. And when you talk about these native potatoes, people that work in the gastronomic sector, in development, they are really excited. So I think that is very important. Or also could be new technologies. So for example, in the case of potatoes, we have a technology that help us to produce seed in the air. Basically, it's called aeroponics. So that is a technology that really attracts people and gets people excited. So I think that is also important. Thank you.
Thanks. I like that you not only shared the challenges, but some solutions. So thanks for that. Hernan, could you share with us?
Sí. Para el accionar de los proyectos productivos, Hakunyai y no Hayatai, que se ejecutan a nivel de sierra y selva en el país, notamos que los efectos del cambio climático ya son bastante fuertes, que prácticamente está destrozando esas aspiraciones, esas oportunidades que tienen estos centros poblados para salir adelante. Entonces, es fundamental fortalecer estas alianzas con organismos, entidades especializadas en el tema de la adaptación al cambio climático y también el tema de mitigación. Por ejemplo, por el lado de la adaptación al cambio climático, ya el proyecto Hakunyai no Hayatai viene implementando el cultivo de abonos orgánicos para fortalecer los terrenos, mejorar los cultivos. Viene implementando pequeños sistemas tecnificados, muy pequeños, artesanales diría yo, pero que son eficientes para la agricultura familiar. Y también se viene trabajando el tema por el lado ya de la mitigación, de la implementación de las cocinas mejoradas. Pero esto lo estamos haciendo de una manera quizá empírica. Necesitamos conocer, evidenciar estos conocimientos ancestrales. Y para ello, repito, es fundamental la participación, la articulación con organismos especializados. Por eso ponía el ejemplo del proyecto regional Andes Resilientes, cómo a través de este proyecto nosotros estamos visibilizando que los emprendimientos rurales inclusivos también ya están poniendo en práctica elementos, conocimientos para la adaptación al cambio climático. Pero ahora nos toca visibilizarlos, tener bien claro los instrumentos de medición que en el devenir de la ejecución de estos proyectos va a permitir mejorar los ingresos de los emprendimientos, va a permitir que estos emprendimientos se adecúen a este contexto de cambio climático. De otro lado, es importante también la participación de los otros organismos del sector público. Hay entidades especializadas en el manejo de la información climática. Esta información climática debe aterrizar para el uso y aplicación de los agricultores. Entonces es importante pues que estos organismos especializados del sector público también puedan transitar, hacer llegar estos instrumentos, esta información de una manera simple, de una manera ágil, de una manera que realmente sea de uso aplicativo para los agricultores. También es importante fortalecer nuestras alianzas con el sector privado. De las exposiciones que hemos ido escuchando, vemos pues que a través de la cadena de valor es muy importante la participación de entidades especializadas, en nuestro caso, para articular nuestros productos de los productores de agricultura familiar hacia mercados locales. Es importante el fortalecimiento de las capacidades productivas. Y en el sector público, existe, por ejemplo, el Ministerio de la Producción, Produce, que tiene todo un know-how para el tema de la gestión empresarial. Y quizá más orientado al sector urbano. Esto hay que llevarlo también al sector rural. Y una dificultad también que quisiera compartir con ustedes es que nosotros tenemos aún una brecha bastante importante en cuanto a la población objetivo. Según nuestros lineamientos de focalización de poblaciones a atender con proyectos de desarrollo productivo para la inclusión económica, en el 2012 identificamos alrededor de 542,000 hogares. Habiendo transcurrido 10 años, hemos atendido alrededor de 360,000, que representan quizá un 66% de atención. Y todavía hay una brecha bastante importante por atender. En ese periodo se ha ejecutado un financiamiento para estos proyectos de alrededor de 500 millones de dólares, un promedio de 50 millones por año en estos últimos 10 años. Pero se requiere mayor financiamiento, porque los efectos del cambio climático se están acelerando y la atención está bastante débil por falta de recursos. De otro lado, también es importante señalar como dificultad la participación activa de los gobiernos locales. Estos proyectos les señalaba que se ejecutan mediante el núcleo actor, pero el núcleo actor en la zona, en el territorio, no trabaja solo, se hace un convenio tripartito entre el núcleo ejecutor como población organizada que recibe el financiamiento, los recursos financieros a una cuenta bancaria comercial y donde cual lo administra para la ejecución del proyecto, el gobierno local, es decir, municipalidad distrital de zonas rurales, que también participa en la ejecución de los proyectos, el acompañamiento, y donde el consejo directivo como miembro del consejo directivo del núcleo actor participa el fiscal, que es designado por la municipalidad distrital, porque es el ojos y oídos de la ejecución y avance del proyecto, y de otro lado, FONCODES como ente financiador. Este convenio tripartito hay que fortalecerlo. Hay que fortalecerlo porque vemos que muchos gobiernos locales un poco que no acompañan este proceso donde se requiere la participación activa. Finalizados los 3 años, ¿qué pasa con los proyectos? La idea es que los gobiernos locales hagan propio de estos proyectos el acompañamiento, el seguimiento, porque lo que está haciendo el proyecto no es suficiente para encontrar la sostenibilidad de estos proyectos a través de la interinstitucionalización de diferentes sectores. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that, for your words, for your lessons and your knowledge. And I'm sure there are a lot of gaps and challenges that we all face. I'm sure that many of those could be solved, or we could move forward towards by collaborating. Now, Emmanuel, could you share us some of your lessons learned?
Sure. A few very practical points. I'll be brief, I guess. when we talk about these alliances, I think, at the end of the day, we as a group need to be competitive, and sometimes it puts pressure on pricing altogether, whereas we're trying to create value locally and promote some kind of premium pricing. But sometimes the market bites back at us in a way and needs us to apply some kind of pressure on pricing. And this is sometimes an issue in places where we want to create value. Then in a very simple way, in places where we operate, this was alluded to before, but we have major geopolitical issues where we have, operating in countries where resilience is not just a fake word. It's a kind of a daily word that you need to go through. And we, as a private company, we have the ability to operate in these type of environments, but this is a huge challenge because everything you build is questioned almost month after month. And it's not as if, as an alliance, the NGOs or the private sector, or even some of the research academia I work with can do anything about it. So this is definitely a big issue. Then things like logistics, we sometimes bump into, as a group, we don't know how to transport some of our crops from one place to another one. You have a border, you have taxes, and you have all of that come up a little bit out of nowhere, and you need to deal with very complex logistics. And this goes together with national restrictions popping up, from time to time, and you cannot foresee them popping up. They do, and you have to deal with it. And by having to face such issues, you can actually sometimes kill a project just because the costs will increase dramatically, or because what we have foreseen being able to do is impossible to do so cross, from one country to another one, which happens, very often. Then in most cases, the products we work with are certified, so either organic Fair for Life, or even UEBT, Union for Ethical Biotrade. And these are sometimes very long certification process. And we all as a group need to be resilient, but sometimes one of our stakeholders jumps out of the ship and the project cannot go on. And we need a shorter certification process, even though it's important to do the right thing, but they need to be shorter. And also, we always call for a standardization of, as an example, fair trade, Fair for Life, fair whatever. They need to come as a group and they need to simplify the certification processes for local communities, I would say worldwide. And then the last one I mentioned before, it's funding. So access to funding is never easy. And especially for these, what I call ag project. Again, you don't need much, but sometimes in a very paradoxical way, it's easier to get a lot more, but we don't need a lot more as a group. And you need to find this little funding that will be the spark that will allow the group to follow the project and to be successful. So more ag targeted funding from I would say national development agencies in a broad way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. We have 10 more minutes, and I was wondering if there's any question in the audience. We have two. Okay, you go first, and then Theo.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm Andres from the Ande Resilientes project. I had the luck of meeting Hernan a couple of months ago in Quito. So, hi, Hernan. So just a quick question. Many of you have highlighted the need to have multi-stakeholder engagement and partnerships. We have had the difficulty within the project of creating these partnerships, but designed in a way that they're not dependent on someone coordinating the space or making the calls for the space, or even necessarily dependent on resources, but so that they create momentum and ownership, and that they continue working even if whoever started the partnership is not there anymore. And that is definitely very difficult to do. So my question for you is if you've had any experiences around this, around creating momentum on the partnerships and reaching a point where partnerships become sort of independent and have the ability to walk on their own. And within that context, if you have seen that there is interest or experiences around integrating indigenous and traditional knowledge, because this is something that we've also seen very relevant to guarantee that ownership, particularly with farmers themselves. But it's also been a second difficult thing to do. So my question is around those two things: sustainability and indigenous and ancestral knowledge.
We can take the second question.
My question is something Jorge said about these alliances, multi-stakeholder partnerships needing time. Is time in this respect a euphemism for trust because of the types of non-state actor, which is a terrible phrase, but let's roll with it, involved? Is the one thing that they need is time for trust to build, for these alliances to become proper alliances and to be effective?
Thank you. So maybe we can start with Jorge answering both questions, and then maybe the other speaker to give a short remark to Andres' question too.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Let's start with the sustainability about these alliances. I think it depends on the purpose of the alliance, but at the end, I think that there is the need of having a neutral player facilitating the alliance, at least at the beginning. It takes time, going back to your question, and as you said, is to create the trust, I think, among the stakeholders. But if we have a private company, following up with one of the panelists mentioned, if we have a private company, then the time actually decreases because they actually act as catalyst, speeding up the process. So it depends a lot on the purpose of the alliance. And about the traditional knowledge that you mentioned, I think that is critically important. So in the case of potatoes, what we have developed, for example, is catalogs of native potato varieties for specific regions. And you can see where, the process of creating these catalogs takes, I don't know, a couple of years. But when you see the final results, you see the enthusiasm that you create, especially with the farmers, because they see that their potatoes are in this book and they have nice pictures, they are recognized in the catalog. So I think that is critically important to put in value the traditional knowledge. Thank you.
Maybe I can add a bit to your question. So at the Global Shea Alliance, one thing we have done and are seeking to strengthen is to develop national association for shea, so that each producer country also have their dedicated association that can engage the government, the stakeholders, and so on. So I think, for me, I think yes, you do need resources. If you want a functioning alliance, you will need a secretariat for it. At a minimum, one person, and then more as the association will grow. In terms of finding these resources, I think, at least at the beginning, there is no substitute for like government support or donor project. But what we have been trying to do, our strategy with this association, is for them to develop services that then they can make either like have member pay for it or increase the membership due so that they can be self-sufficient. And these services can be around, market linkages. They can provide technical capacity building. They can provide public-private partnership, like anything that is needed. But you do need to integrate this revenue strategy. But that said, it's a long way. Even at the GSA, I think most of our funding doesn't come from the members, but it still comes from donors.
Marie. Hernan, could you share your answer to the question?
Sí, la continuidad de estos proyectos se desarrolla a través de los gobiernos locales posteriormente a la culminación de la intervención de los 3 años. Y esto gracias a que a través del desarrollo de capacidades que el proyecto ha logrado en estos hogares rurales se produce un empoderamiento tal que cada hogar continúa, ya sea con la producción de las diferentes tecnologías productivas o de la gestión de los emprendimientos rurales inclusivos. Y esto es llevado a cabo a través de los yachachi, que son talentos locales, que son expertos técnicos productivos de la zona, que llegan a los hogares y transmiten estos conocimientos y fortalecen los saberes ancestrales de esta población. De otro lado, es fundamental también que para la continuidad de estos proyectos, y alguien decía, cómo es que estas alianzas, digamos, se constituyen, cómo se asegura su participación, es que es a base de este trabajo de desarrollo de capacidades productivas que la población se empodera de los proyectos. Entonces, ellos buscan otros financiamientos, con CODES al tercer año desarrolla un trabajo de, digamos, de articulación con diferentes organismos, programas, a efectos de encontrar también financiamientos que posibilite la continuidad de estos proyectos. Sí.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel?
Yes, a lot has been said. I think just to add a few words, I mean, I think I agree the private sector can act as a catalyst, and I think we as a company, Olvea, we do. However, KPIs are not always aligned. So the way we do it is whenever we are part of a project locally based, either in West or East Africa, the project is managed from local teams, from our local subsidiaries. So we have people dealing with integrated supply chains locally. And the reason why these projects can be sustained is because they are the one managing it directly. And of course, in coordination with the other stakeholders. So that's the first thing. In terms of tradition and how do we deal with it, usually locally when we try to enhance the development of the supply chain and gather more volumes, we have to respect the local traditions. Otherwise, it doesn't work. When you try to mechanize something which is, hand-picked, as an example, it doesn't work. When you try to gather some kind of corporate structure locally, it doesn't work. And we respect that, and it works. We can basically enhance a project without stepping onto the traditions, because our experience tells us it never works. And then the last question around time and trust, I guess, I just addressed it. I think, yeah, with time you build trust, but you also need to address it with the right organization, even though we are a corporation and we represent the private sector.
Thank you very much. I think we only have like maybe 30 seconds. The decision-making spaces, and it's really great to hear how each of you in your own arena promote having the local voices and all the actors in the decision-making process included. So I think that adds a lot of value. Also, I think that it was really nice to hear how each one of you shared a different vision for the same topic. And I think that's part of the collaboration, because each actor adds value to the process. Like science, having these indicators, and researchers preparing papers for the scientific community being able to learn, and the private sector also raising the opportunities in the market, and governments being able to promote sustainability in the process, and building really like profound opportunities, and also, of course, hearing these different governance models. I think that was really awesome, and I hope everyone enjoyed the panel as much as I did. And thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sophie.